Okay, one more today. One more. I am exhausted. I've been YouTubing. I've been doing content. I've been fixing robots. I gotta take a nap after this. So I just saw this video posted by CTV News. Canada's finances are in new territory. I think it's that Jacques guy who was talking about the budget before. It's a short video, 8 minutes. Let's see if I don't pass out before it finishes. But I think this budget is important because it's going to do a couple things. It's going to affect inflation 100%. Whatever happens, inflation will be affected and it's going to affect jobs. And we want to pay attention to that because the employment landscape in this country, Canada, our beautiful mess of a nation, is absolutely catastrophic. We got to do better. So I'm curious to see what Jacques and Co is saying. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to Question Period. Headed into tomorrow's high-stakes confidence vote in the House, MPs will be armed with new information. Parliament's fiscal watchdog has dug into the Prime Minister's first budget, and two major findings stand out. First, the PBO says it is unlikely that the government's stated fiscal anchor or declining deficit to GDP ratio will be respected. Second, the PBO maintains its view that the government's definition of capital investments is overly expansive. Jason Jacques is the interim Parliamentary Budget Officer. Hi, Mr. Jacques.
Oh, he's
Good to welcome
there.
you
That's
back.
him.
Thank you very much for making the time.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
I wanted to start off on the second point. What is it that you see as overly expansive, and how impactful is it that it is?
From our perspective, we think that the definition the government's used around capital investments is overly expansive. And in particular, they've thrown some things in there, some categories of spending, which other jurisdictions in other countries would not typically include. Most notably, the inspiration, of course, for this framework comes from the United Kingdom. And in the case of the UK, it's a far narrower definition. And of course, the biggest risk with all of this is if you're not spending on productive capital investments, if you have an overly broad definition, then you're not going to get the investment impact and the growth in the economy that the government expects.
What about fiscal anchors? That's what we spoke about the last time you were here. You were really tracking this very closely. They've obviously changed from what they promised would be the fiscal anchor, debt to GDP, and the platform to deficit to GDP. What do you see there?
Local is near and dear to my heart.
Local means fresh. There's a great sense of pride in being able to feed our own family a product that we've raised.
Feed your family like we feed ours. See the difference with Conestoga Farms golden yolk eggs, because
I would honestly like these ads really get me, guys. Like I'm highly susceptible to ads. I'll click on them, buy stuff, and I do like food that comes off a farm. So, well, they got
local
me.
matters.
Certainly, in the case of the deficit to GDP, it should come as no surprise that I agree with not the new government, but the previous government that indicated that the debt to GDP ratio is the most important medium-term indicator of fiscal sustainability and essential for securing Canada's AAA credit rating.
Right there. That's the big contentious issue right now, is that our debt to GDP or productivity, or how much people are actually doing in this country in terms of their output globally, or compared to global benchmarks or just our previous benchmarks. We don't do enough here, guys. We don't produce enough. We don't have enough technical skill versus how much money we owe collectively. Like we're working, well, we're working away. The debt and the interests are too strong. They're taking too much from us. So, man, it's crazy. Look at this freeze frame on this guy. It's just so amazing to see like someone from the government saying this stuff, because growing up as a kid, I'm going through all these different workplaces, getting fired like 4 or 5 times. And a lot of the times in the workplace, you'd have groups of people literally just doing nothing. People would go to work and do nothing all day. I remember even like there were times where I got to go to work. I'm like, hey, I didn't do anything today. It was a great day at work. Like people would be like happy that they weren't producing and they were getting paid. Congratulations, Canada. We really did it, because now we're at a point where our productivity is so bad we can't even afford to pay back our debts. It's a serious issue in this country, and that's why, like, we've been living in an easy time when a lot of people could go to work and not produce a lot. Now we live in a time where people have to go to work and hyper produce. I call them hyper producers, just to make up for the lack of production from others. So, I mean, I want to consider myself a hyper producer. Like, it's Sunday, and this is my fourth YouTube video on top of the AI agents and workflow automations that I worked on top of the content. Like, I worked like crazy today, but that's because I know that my Monday through Friday is going to be so busy I won't even have time. So there is, I mean, it's a choice you want to make. You want to put in you want to burn the midnight oil, or do you want to, have your hand out for people who did. It's really up to you. And in this country, I think a lot of people are going to have to be hyper producers just to carry the rest of us.
The government has cut that anchor. So that is no longer part of the suite of fiscal anchors the government is using. And it's certainly not our place to judge which fiscal anchors the government uses. At the same time, the way in which the government went about this was certainly not transparent. So we've had this fiscal anchor for over 30 years. Other jurisdictions look at the debt to GDP anchor and a declining level of debt to GDP as being the mainstay of fiscal anchors. It's something that the Liberal Party of Canada campaigned on in 2025 in April. It was in their platform. And without any discussion whatsoever, this fiscal anchor was eliminated.
And what about if you did apply that calculation? Like, where do you see debt to GDP? Because you had identified that in the lead up to the budget as, one of the primary things informing your position at the time, which was very controversial, that things were unsustainable fiscally, that we were looking over a fiscal cliff. So where is debt to GDP going, and why do you conclude in this that things are still sustainable?
So in the case of debt to GDP, over the medium term and over the longer term, debt to GDP is effectively going to be flat. So we no longer have a declining debt to GDP ratio. Based upon our calculations, there's very limited margin for error based upon the government's fiscal agenda at this point. And of course, looking back, it's important to remember that this is very different than what we've seen over the past 30 years.
So why are you saying now that it's sustainable, but a few months ago that was not? Like, were you mistaken before, or is the calculation on something?
In terms of, so previously, these numbers are very similar to the numbers we saw previously. The definition of sustainability is your debt to GDP ratio is stable or declining over time. And that's not my definition. That's the government's definition. That's the definition from the International Monetary Fund. So based upon the widely accepted international definition, that was the case before. That continues to be the case now.
So you still think the fiscal situation here is unsustainable?
I think the current fiscal situation, we moved into new territory. So based upon the previous government's fiscal anchors, it was a situation where the government, if they were targeting a stable or declining debt to GDP ratio, then there was very limited margin for error or room for maneuver. Now we're in a situation where the government makes no pretense about having a stable or declining debt to GDP ratio. We're in a new territory where it appears as if the government is making the argument that in comparison to other countries, we have room to spend. So
I'm waiting, like, what's the point of all what this guy's talking about? Sounds like a bunch of trash. And then finally we land on a point that makes sense, or at least I made sense of it. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I honestly, I'm going to take the AI machine and decipher what this man is saying and get a nice description up for you guys. But my understanding of what he's saying is that the previous government used this fiscal anchor, or this system, or this denomination of debt to GDP in order to navigate decision making with finances. So if the debt to GDP was declining, that is a sustainable fiscal environment for the country. The debt to GDP is declining. That means our GDP is either going up or debt's going down. One way or another, at some point in the future, the debt will be paid down because our GDP is climbing or the debt's going down. That was the previous government's position on navigating what should we do with money. Is it going to affect debt to GDP? Okay, great. Like, we know what to do. We have sort of a compass, a financial compass on what we should do. Financial anchor, whatever these guys want. All these stupid words. Now, what Jason Jacques, what a name. JJ, what JJ is saying is that our current government is no longer taking into consideration these fiscal anchors, such as our debt to GDP ratio. So imagine our debt to GDP ratio is 10 to 11. So we have 10 points of debt, but we have 11 points of GDP. We're good. We can pay down that debt eventually. But now the new government is saying, guys, don't worry about that ratio. Don't worry about it. We're going to spend $100 billion of your money. So that's what our current government is essentially doing. And Jacques is trying to tell us all, it's like, guys, the reason why Canada's finances are in a new territory is because we're ignoring the compasses and safeguards that we have been using to navigate our decisions for the last God knows how many decades. We're no longer going to take them into consideration. At least that's my understanding. I'm not an economist or whatever. I'm not an AI. I'm a technologist. I'm an AI tooling tool. But at least that's what I understand from what Jacques is saying. I mean, maybe he can explain it in layman's terms so that more people can understand. I don't know. Like, continue, Jacques. Continue, JJ.
Because our debt levels are lower than some other countries, we can go out, we can borrow the money, and we could spend the money the next time that there's an economic shock, and if we need to. And that,
do you think that's true? Pardon the interruption.
Oh,
do
sure.
you think that's true? They say the IMF agrees. Do you think it's true?
If I think hopefully the government can go out and borrow additional money at this point. It's not a question of borrowing the money. It's a question of what the money is fundamentally going to be spent on. And as somebody who's responsible for fiscal transparency, I do need to point out that nobody has had this discussion. So during the 2025 election campaign, all major political parties identified a declining debt to GDP ratio as being the most important fiscal anchor. We're now
right there, to reiterate what I was saying, political parties up until this point, up until our current government, guys, all the political parties up to our current government on whatever side of the aisle I don't even know how that works, Canada. Is it the aisles? the liberals, conservatives, or whatever, the red, blue, green, everyone, all the different colors. They all said that this fiscal anchor of debt to GDP was important. Our current government does not.
Now in a situation on September 18th, in response to a question in QP, the Prime Minister himself said one of the three fiscal anchors for this government was a declining debt to GDP ratio. Don't believe me? Look it up in Hansard. All of a sudden in the budget, that anchor that we've had for 30 years, the most important fiscal anchor, is gone without any discussion whatsoever. And now we're in new territory where potentially we're going to be borrowing substantially more money the next time that there's an economic shock. And it's not for me to judge that. It is for me to point out that nobody has had a meaningful discussion around that.
Before I let you go, I mentioned how there was quite a bit of reaction among the government ranks to your initial analysis. They posted your job on a permanent basis, and they used in the job posting the candidate has to show, quote, tact and discretion and communicate in a neutral way. Do you think that's aimed at you?
I hope it is. I've worked on the Hill for 17 years. I've dealt with thousands of parliamentarians. I've also been responsible for the electoral platform costing exercise in the 2019, 2021, and most recent elections. And so I have a lot of experience, probably more experience than most people around town do, in dealing with parliamentarians across political parties who come from different cultural backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds. And tactfully and discreetly working with political parties around the platform promises that they want to make, even in situations where they don't necessarily like the numbers that we're giving back to them. And I absolutely think it's an essential part of the character, the individual that should occupy the permanent post of PBO.
And forgive me if this is too personal, you don't have to answer. Will you apply to be the permanent one?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's, from my own perspective,
whatever this guy's applying for, just give him the goddamn job. Like these guys out, we have someone in Parliament Hill or whatever. Someone in the government is telling the truth, guys. Hire him now.
Having worked in the office since the beginning, I think it's important that parliamentarians have the choice. So they will have the choice that they've seen what I plan on doing and how I plan on managing the office. They have the choice for this approach, the current approach, or they have a choice for a new approach. And if the Prime Minister decides he wants to go in a different direction, along with members of Parliament, I certainly respect that. And I certainly plan to be with the office, regardless of the outcome, to support whoever is in that role.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there, Mr. Jacques. Thank you very much.
This guy's amazing.
Thank you.
Man. This guy is such a good, that guy was such a, oh my gosh, we need more people like that. Like at least he's looking at the budget going, guys, are we really going to spend all this money and not tell anyone? But yeah, I think it's up to $100 billion now. $100 billion budget. So that $100 billion budget, guys, it's going to be, and this is Jason Jacques. It's going to be for all sorts of stuff, housing, manufacturing, like military stuff, which is really cool. I'm definitely a proponent of strong military. Like I don't get like I get videos on YouTube coming up of like old wartime stuff. Like Canadians are really I wouldn't say they're good at war, but I would say they're really enthusiastic when it comes to warfare. Let's just put it that way. Canadian soldiers really ripped it up in World War I, so I respect that. So I don't mind that stuff. But when JJ comes on and says, "Hey guys, like we have some sort of guidelines and rules that the government sort of takes into consideration when spending," and we've been doing that for the past 30 years. Our debt to GDP ratio. We've been using our debt to GDP ratio for the past 30 years, and now for some reason we don't care about it. Just around the time of $100 billion budget. So just take that into consideration and take in how much inflation have Canadians had to endure since 2020 because of spending by the government. Guys, spending by the government causes inflation. Take that in. Okay, so that's the point. The first point: spending by the government causes inflation. Second point: this government is about to spend $100 billion on stuff, whole bunch of cool stuff. Great. Third point: previous governments have always looked at this benchmark or this anchor as something to consider when spending money. Fourth and last point, to wrap it all up, this government does not. And I'm literally just reiterating what he's saying. That's not my opinion at all. It's literally happening real time in front of us. And that's why I got to say, like, I'm going to stress this so much. We have to pay attention to this stuff, guys. We got to pay attention or literally the government's going to spend our asses to oblivion. And it's literally going to cost this is what happens in Canada. Inflation hits the cost of goods across the board, including what? Including the cost of goods that go into building homes. So if developers are looking at the cost of goods to build homes go up, they have to do one of two things. They either have to raise the prices of those homes, even though they're of similar quality, and we know raising prices of homes in Canada will not work. People just don't have money here. Like we literally don't have money. So if Canadians can't afford inflated prices on homes, what do the developers necessarily need to do in order to meet the demand for homes, home building, whatever? They need to save the money on the cost of goods. And the only way you're going to save money on cost of goods that go into building a home is if you devastate the quality and integrity of that home, i.e., uh, what are these like modular homes? These, instead of dog crates, we're gonna get like kitten cages that you can move around with trucks. Honestly, I can't believe I'm witnessing this stuff in Canada. This is absolutely amazing. Anyways, that's the last video of the day. I'm absolutely tanked. If you like the type of conversation we're having here, or you just like following what's going on with Canada, the news, JJ's bringing it to us hot, my guy. You feel free to like and subscribe. If you don't like this stuff or you don't care, just hit dislike, leave a mean comment. If you don't like me, leave a mean comment. Like we want it all. If you don't recognize me, my name is Alex. We run an AI agency in Toronto. We talk about housing market, labor, all sorts of stuff. Budgets tied up in there. And whenever all the engagement that you guys give us helps our business grow. So, tell us what you want. And I really appreciate it. Like, literally, it's the contribution that you guys make that help us get leads. So appreciate that. But JJ, man, I really hope you get inducted into the government or whatever happens. Like, however we need to get you and your friends to work in like the finance department at the government so we can have a future in this country. I'm all for it. And looking forward to the next one. Bye now.